Here we have an old grandfather clock, or a tall case clock. Let's see if I can get it in more light. Excuse me, this was made in the 1780s. The bottom has a little crack on it, or a big crack. And how I know it's an older case is because it's made with rosehead nails. It's walnut. 9 out of 10 clock cases in the 1700s were made out of walnut. Now that changed in the 1800s to mostly mahogany. Plus, when you look at that door, the door opening and the door itself are the same. In other words, I can push that door and it'll swing either way. Later, they made the door so there was a molding around the door. The lip of the door was bigger than the opening, and they could, so when you shut the door, it couldn't go inside the case. Some fluting on the sides. Very plain top with some stringing there. Not sure, it could be boxwood. There is some stringing on the bottom, can't see it. But these typically didn't have feet. They just rested, as you see, flat up against the floor. Kind of nice walnut. Of course, the difference between mahogany and walnut, sometimes it's hard to tell. With walnut, the growth rings are dark or black. And on mahogany, they're light. Those are the growth rings. So if you have a problem determining the difference. Plus, here is the faceplate, and you can see the spandrels, which are the corners, all four. There's some gold paint in there. And prior to painted dials, they were all made out of brass. And the spandrels had applied brass ornamentation. But that was expensive, so they switched over to painted dials, and the early painted dials continued the spandrels to kind of look like the old brass ones. Plus, when you look at the numbers, they're Roman. And if you look next to each Roman numeral is the Arabic equivalent. That was the early clocks. Plus, the early dials didn't have any painting in the middle of the dial. All four hands, second hand, so you can see they're moving. Hour hand, minute hand. And the bottom there is the month, day of the month. All are matching. What makes this clock kind of, now it's going to strike and I'll stop. It's only going to strike 2, but that is a very interesting painting up there, hand painting. I'm not sure how close I can get, but what you see there is a very content woman leaning on an anchor. And you could see, if that's as close as pretty much I can get, she is very, very content to lean on that anchor. And if you see her foot there, her heel is up and her toe is down, she is very content. And right there is a British warship. There's the British flag. And there are the openings in the side of the ship for the cannons. That's a warship. Here we go. Typical of the day, they all had a bell. Now, in the 1700s, the brass works were imported from England. So weren't these dials and the hands. Later in the 1800s, we developed a way of making brass works. But back in this day, they were imported into the United States. Now she's leaning on an anchor, and an anchor is a symbol of the Navy. As it was then, it is today, even in this country. And here, with this very content look, She leans on the very security of the British Navy, which was its power in the day. That's how they colonized the world, was through the Navy. And she is very secure in British power, the lifestyle that that gives her. Very controversial to have this imported into the United States at the earliest during the Revolutionary War or just after. Now, there were a lot of loyalists in this country that did stay after the war and would have appreciated this. So one of the reasons why I bought this clock is for that reason. Plus, the painting has survived really well. Yes, there's a lot of paint loss. A lot of the gold gilding is gone. It's cracked. You can see some of the cracking, I think. Very typical. You know, as you can see, paint loss. But not as bad as some. As you can see, the minutes are a dot and not a dash. It has no chapter ring, meaning a ring around, all the way around the dial. I don't know if I can get this into focus, but if you look at this clock here, or maybe I'll go over here, you could see the ring, the dashes for the minute, and the chapter ring, double chapter ring. That's typical 1800s. But in the 1700s, they didn't do that. So a very nice old clock, works really well, keeps time for a 225-year-old plus clock. Unbelievable what they could do back then. And beautiful, solid walnut. It's not veneered. Yeah, it has a little bit of damage. And over here you could see a little bit of the decoration there, Gothic type. And then the nice walnut all the way down. These work really well as long as they're secure, and that's why you see that string there, and there's another string up top inside to anchor bolts in the wall, just in case it wants to tip a little bit. So that's my roughly 1780-85 clock I bought for that beautiful dial. You just don't see clock dials that old that have been preserved so well. Kind of a nice case, unfortunately cracked, but as with most antiques, that's just part of the charm. Thanks for watching.